What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading. You say to that man that he can never get out of it. Other racial groups have been able maybe to change the accent or change the names, but the Negro can't.
You work for Mr. Dunn down at the rest home, ain't that right?
Yes, sir.
Wonder what old Dunn will say when I tell him one of his gals down here stirring a fuss.
I ain't stirring no fuss. I'm just here trying to register to vote.
Recite the Constitution's preamble. You know what a preamble is?
We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union.
How many county judges in Alabama?
67.
Name them.
I saw recently, this is my last question, that you opposed an automatic registration at 18. I wanted you to, could you speak to that a bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't think that just because your birthday comes around that you ought to be registered to vote. Because Congressman John Lewis, who would tell you that he's my friend, Congresswoman Terry Sewell, who represents Alabama's 7th District, who my daughter had the privilege to intern for 2 summers ago in Washington, D.C., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Jesse Jackson, A. Philip Randolph, Whitney Young. I can name many, many civil rights pioneers. Rosa Parks, Attorney Fred Gray, who I nominated and received a national award for helping people whose voting rights had been restricted. These people fought. Some of them were beaten. Some of them were killed because of their desire to ensure that everybody that wanted to had the right to register to vote and participate in the process. I'm not going to cheapen the work that they did. I'm not going to embarrass them by allowing somebody that's too sorry to get up off of their rear end to go register to vote, or now, because of what we've done, turn the computer on and register to vote because they think they deserve the right because they've turned 18. To me, that's no different than giving them a trophy because they played on a ball team. You only get a trophy if you win. And if you want to participate in the process, there's a system for doing that. And we want to make sure that they have the ability to do that, and we're going to help them have the opportunity to do it. But just because you turned 18 doesn't give you the right to do anything. You don't deserve that privilege. As long as I'm Secretary of State of Alabama, you're going to have to show some initiative to become a registered voter in this state. There will be no impediment to you participating. But if you want to participate in this process, you're going to have to participate.
So what is voter suppression? It's actually part of the U.S. Legal Code, Title 18, Section 594 to be exact. By definition, voter suppression is any effort, either legal or illegal, by way of laws, administrative rules, or tactics that prevents eligible voters from registering to vote or voting. In practice, it's enforcing voter ID laws, closing polling places in certain neighborhoods, reducing hours, or purging registrations. Those tactics disproportionately impact communities of color and the elderly. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 tried to eliminate them. But in 2013, Supreme Court case Shelby County v. Holder rolled back a lot of these protections, especially in southern states. In a 5-4 decision, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that the law was based on decades-old data and eradicated practices, and that there was no longer such a disparity for communities of color. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg famously dissented, "That's like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet." Since that decision, 25 states, many in the South, have put in place new voter restrictions like ID requirements and cutbacks in early voting.
As long as I am unable to exercise my constitutional right to vote, I do not have command of my own life. I cannot determine my own destiny, for it is determined for me by people who would rather see me suffer than succeed. Those that have gone before us say, no more, no more. That means protest, that means march, that means disturb the peace, that means jail, that means risk, and that is hard. We will not wait any longer. Give us the vote. We're not asking, we're demanding. Give us the vote.
A wave of voter suppression bills is flooding into state houses across the country. In Biden's first 100 days alone, state-level Republicans introduced more than 360 bills to restrict voting rights. But how have Republican officials in different states introduced legislation so quickly, seemingly in lockstep? And is the Republican Party looking to do more than restrict voter access?
One of the most egregious things is that Republicans are changing who oversees elections in the first place. So that if they don't like the result of the election, they can have an easier time challenging votes and potentially not even certifying election outcomes. You could have a state election board that is beholden to the Republican-dominated legislature actually take over an election board in a heavily Democratic area in Atlanta, like Fulton County, Atlanta, for example, one of the most Democratic counties in the state.
I know you're asking today, how long will it take?
Somebody's asking, how long will prejudice blind the visions of men? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, yes, sir, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed earth will rise again. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. Yes, sir. Because no lie can live forever. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. How long? Because you shall reap what you sow. Yes, sir. How long? Not long. How long? Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yes, that scaffold sways the future. Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Yes, sir.
If you can't register to vote, you can't be on a jury. If you can't be on a jury, you can't serve as a fact finder, as a jury member of one of your peers on trial. If you can't serve as a fact finder, then we don't know if, in fact, that person is having a fair trial. And one of the hallmarks of our Constitution is the Sixth Amendment, which guarantees us, in criminal settings, a right to a jury trial. Now, the Voting Rights Act is from 50 years ago, but now you can see the lingering effects or the contemporary effects that it has in our everyday lives.
How did Republican officials in different states pass such similar legislation so quickly? Well, a network of dark money groups and conservative think tanks has played an essential role in turning Trump's big lie into bills that suppress the right to vote.
As we create this echo chamber, we're working with these state legislators to make sure they have all of the information they need to draft the bills. In some cases, we actually draft them for them, or we have a sentinel on our behalf give them the model legislation. So it has that grassroots, from the bottom up type of vibe.
Mother Jones and Documented obtained leaked video of a top conservative think tank and political organization, Heritage Action for America, basically bragging to top donors that they are writing what they call model legislation, restricting voting rights in key battleground states like Georgia and Texas and Arizona.
Any state can take our policy recommendations, but we have honed in on these 8 specific focused states because they are battleground states.
In a completely behind-the-scenes manner, our democracy is being held captive by big money, by special interests.
Some of these groups are also mobilizing against Democrats' 2 bills to protect voting rights at the federal level, the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Whether or not these bills pass at the federal level, organizers on the ground in these states will play a key role in protecting voting rights.
State of Georgia yesterday, this week, the session started. We're looking at a session where the Republicans are actually trying to eliminate drop-off boxes and the absentee ballot voting process. We're looking at Lincoln County. We're doing work right now in Lincoln County where they're attempting to close all of the polling sites with the exception of just having one polling site in the entire county. I'm raising those things because I think we've been saying this. We've been very consistent from day one over the last year that it's going to take local support, it's going to take a legal strategy, and it's going to take federal legislation. There's no way around it. That some of what we're seeing happening right now, the only thing that can actually stop it is we're going to have federal legislation, right? And so there's some oversight because there's 3 ways that they've actually been attacking it. 1 is about creating the culture of fear. 2, it's been weaponizing the administrative process. And 3, it's about restricting access of who can freely and fairly participate in elections. Honest about the history of the filibuster. The filibuster has been the single barrier that that has been weaponized in the Senate to stop civil rights legislation. This isn't new. We're back at this moment again, and let's also remember that the filibuster there have been exceptions of how putting the filibuster aside, including how the Republicans used it to make sure that they got Trump judges in. So it is not unconscionable for us to expect that there would be some carve out of the filibuster so that we can get voting rights in this country. This issue around voting access, This is serious. We're dealing with that right now as we speak. And we need action now. It's been over a year and nothing has moved on it. We need concrete action.